When you look at a map, you expect absolute precision. You find that solid, brightly colored line on the paper, and you basically just follow it from point A to point B.
Right, you trust the map.
Exactly. But what if the map to the next decade of human history was written like 500 years ago, and it was written in invisible ink by a man that modern pop culture has just completely misunderstood?
Yeah, then you step into a navigational landscape that is um, incredibly murky, where the landmarks shift and the compass just kind of spins based entirely on how you decode the language.
It is the absolute definition of muddy waters. So today we are taking a deep dive into some source material that completely redraws the map on, well, one of the most infamous pieces of writing in human history.
Oh, absolutely.
We are unpacking a highly complex, intensely debated decoding of Nostradamus, specifically Century 10, Quatrain 72.
Which is a quatrain that has suffered from, frankly, decades of superficial, highly theatrical interpretations.
Yeah, so for you listening, if you hear the name Nostradamus and your mind immediately goes to like cheap tabloids or tinfoil hats and that whole 1999 doomsday pop culture cliche, I need you to tear that image up right now.
Right, throw it out.
Because the source material provided for our deep dive today reveals this profound geopolitical, astronomical, and historical roadmap. It is dense, it is layered, and it completely reframes how we're even supposed to read this text.
Yeah, the decoding we're looking at today treats the quatrain as a deeply coded framework, like a system for understanding cyclical global shifts,
Yeah.
rather than just some spooky parlor trick.
But before we jump in, I want to give a clear impartiality disclaimer for you. The document we are analyzing today makes some pretty sweeping claims about, the fall of Western financial systems, the collapse of global orders, and the military resurgence of the East.
Huge claims.
Massive.
Mm.
So our mission here is to impartially report and explore these concepts exactly as they are laid out in the original document. We are not endorsing these viewpoints, we aren't picking sides left or right, and we certainly aren't predicting the future.
Right, we're just analyzing the text.
Exactly. We are simply acting as your guides to understanding the internal logic of this specific interpretation.
And the architecture of this decoding is undeniably intricate. I mean, understanding the mechanics behind it is just a fascinating exercise in historical and astrological synthesis.
Okay, well, let's unpack this. The very first thing this source material does is take an absolute sledgehammer to the year 1999.
Yes, it completely dismantles it.
Right. So in the original French, Nostradamus wrote "Le 1999," literally the year 1999. And for decades, the assumption was just that this was a literal date on a calendar, like July 1999. But our source argues that this isn't a year at all.
No, not even close. The text proposes this really brilliant metaphor for an administrative and financial collapse, and it's built entirely on Latin and Roman numerals.
So walk us through this logic. How does a phrase that translates as 1999 become a financial timeline? Looking at the text, the decoder isolates the Roman numerals, right? So M for 1,000, CM for 900, XC for 90, and IX for 9.
Yeah, to really grasp this, we have to look through the lens of Roman imperial history and their systems of measurement. So in a Roman context, M and CM, 1,000 and 900, they aren't merely sequential numbers.
What are they then?
They symbolize the grand cycles of a civilization's rise. They represent the absolute zenith of Roman imperial sovereignty, like the maximum expansion of an empire's economic and administrative power.
Okay, so the first half of that sequence is basically the empire at its absolute peak.
Exactly. Then we hit the back half of the phrase, 90 and 9, XCIX. The source text links this specifically to the Roman tax system, which is known as the indiction cycle.
Right, the indiction cycle. I actually had to look this up in the notes. This was a mandatory 15-year taxation and administrative cycle.
Yeah, let's put that in perspective. Imagine living in an agrarian society where the entire economic burden of the empire is reassessed and strictly enforced every 15 years.
Wow.
It essentially dictates the wealth of every single citizen. And the math the decoder uses here is crucial. 6 of these 15-year indiction cycles make up a 90-year supercycle. And that covers the XC, the 90 part of the phrase.
Which just leaves the final 9.
Right, and in the numerology and the historical framework being applied by the source, the number 9 represents absolute completion. It is the ceiling. The document refers to this specific mathematical breaking point as debt saturation.
So think of this not as a date on a calendar, but as a civilization maxing out its cosmic credit card.
That is a great way to put it.
The 99 is the exact moment the card is finally declined. A debt has reached a mathematical breaking point, and the system just can't sustain the weight of its own expansion anymore.
Exactly. And the text connects this peak debt saturation directly to what it calls the end of Western economic arrogance. It actually ties Quatrain 72 to other verses, like Quatrain 64 and 78,
Yeah.
which just describe the illusion of gold and silver breaking and the fall of old financial capitals.
But here is where I have to push back a little, or at least ask for the mechanism behind this leap. I mean, I follow the Roman numeral decoding, right? And the 15-year tax cycles make sense.
Sure.
But the source material suddenly jumps from ancient Roman tax cycles to a highly specific series of lunar eclipses happening in 2026 and 2027. We literally go from a 16th century poet writing about an ancient Roman tax system to 21st century astronomy. How does the text possibly bridge that gap?
What's fascinating here is the ancient understanding of cyclical time. You see, modern society views time linearly. We see it as a straight line from the past into the future.
Right, year after year.
But ancient and medieval thinkers viewed time as wheels within wheels. So the source material argues that a financial collapse described by historical Roman numerals, it can't just happen in a vacuum. It requires a cosmic trigger. The heavens provide the timing, while human economics provide the fuel.
So it essentially maps the Roman numeral sequence directly onto a sequence of eclipses.
Yes. According to the document, the decoder found a specific sequence of lunar eclipses that acts as a 4-stage cosmic countdown clock. And it mirrors the 1999 perfectly. The process begins with the lunar eclipse on August 28, 2026. This corresponds to the M, the 1000.
The first bell ringing, basically.
Exactly. Then, February 20th to 21st, 2027, corresponds to the CM, the 900. July 18th to 19th, 2027, aligns with the XC, the 90.
Wow, they're close together.
Very close.
Yeah.
And almost immediately after that, July 16th to 17th, 2027, is the IX, the 9. That is the final saturation point where the system buckles.
It's just an incredibly bold synthesis of celestial mechanics and earthly economics. So that establishes the when and the how of the financial trigger, according to this decoding.
Right.
And the narrative in the source material naturally flows into the cosmic mechanisms driving this change. Like, the quatrain explicitly mentions the 7th month, but the source says we shouldn't be looking at July.
No, because Nostradamus was writing under the influence of the Julian calendar, which was deeply steeped in these medieval astronomical traditions. In those systems, the year began in March, with the spring equinox.
Okay, so if you're counting forward from March, the 7th month, September, is quite literally September.
Exactly. Astronomically, September brings the autumn equinox.
The exact moment the scales snap. The days start getting shorter and the nights get longer.
And the source argues this is a profound metaphor for global power. The autumn equinox represents the fading of the light, which the text explicitly aligns with Western dominance and the rise of an era of darkness and mystery. It really signifies the twilight of an entire era of global governance.
And out of that darkness comes the most famous line of this whole prophecy. From the sky will come a great king of terror. Now, pop culture loves to paint this as an asteroid or aliens or like a literal monster falling from the clouds.
Right, the Hollywood version.
Exactly. But our source roots this entirely in ancient Vedic and Persian astrology.
The document actually identifies the king of terror as Rahu.
Let's define that for the listener, because Rahu isn't, a physical rock floating in space.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
In ancient astronomical systems, Rahu is the dragon's head. It's what they call a shadow planet. It represents the mathematical nodes where eclipses occur, like the exact points in space where the moon crosses the sun's path and seemingly swallows it.
It literally eats the light. But, and here's my question, if the king of terror is just an astronomical mechanism, like a shadow planet causing an eclipse, why code it with a word as emotionally charged as terror? That seems overly dramatic for just a mathematical point in space.
This raises an important question about how we perceive natural events. To us, an eclipse is a neat scientific event, right? We go out and watch it with those special cardboard glasses.
Right, it's an event.
But to the ancient and medieval mind, the sudden, unannounced disappearance of the sun was a massive disruption of the natural order. It was absolute terror.
Basically a literal glitch in reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In astrological terms, Rahu represents sudden, violent disruption. It brings sudden illusions, massive political upheaval, and the overnight overthrow of established powers. It is the cosmic embodiment of a system shock.
Wow.
Consider how modern society fears sudden, unpredictable system shocks, like a total financial crash, a sudden power grid failure, or a supply chain collapse. We fear the systemic blackouts just as much as ancient societies fear the sun disappearing. So the terror is really the total loss of predictability.
That makes a lot of sense. So the light fades, the system is shocked, and the old financial order hits debt saturation and collapses. And, well, nature abhors a vacuum, and so does geopolitics.
Yeah.
If the West is fading, and sudden political upheavals are wiping out established powers, someone has to step in. So the narrative moves from the cosmos right back down to Earth, analyzing the phrase, King of Anglemoy.
Yeah, and this is one of the most compelling linguistic decodings in the entire document. The text argues that Anglemoy is a precise anagram for Mongol, or Mongolia.
Signifying a dormant power rising from Asia, specifically that region of China, Mongolia, and Central Asia.
Right. Under the disruptive, chaotic influence of Rahu, an incredibly disciplined, powerful, and perhaps ruthless military or political leadership will emerge from this region. The text compares it directly to Genghis Khan, suggesting this new power will disrupt the global order just as the Mongol Empire once completely rewrote the map of Eurasia.
But how do they actually execute this takeover? Because the text doesn't describe some massive global war. It says, Mars reigns by good fortune. And Mars is the god of war, bloodshed. So how does war reign by good fortune?
The tactical analysis in the source gets really sharp here. It argues that Mars reigning by good fortune means this new Asian leadership will intentionally avoid constant, total, all-out war.
Because that exhausts resources. Right.
Exactly. It exhausts resources and it unites your enemies against you. So instead, they will utilize what the text calls intermittent warfare.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The source explicitly connects this 16th century concept to modern military strategy, calling it hybrid warfare or salami slicing.
Salami slicing, yes.
Let me give you an analogy for this because I think it perfectly captures what the source is arguing. Salami slicing is like a neighbor who decides they want your property, but instead of showing up with a bulldozer and declaring war on you, they just move their fence exactly 1 inch into your yard in the middle of the night.
Right. The intrusion is almost imperceptible.
Exactly. You wake up, you see the fence moved 1 inch, but you think, I'm not going to start a violent feud with my neighbor, involve the police, and deal with lawyers over 1 single inch of grass. It's just not worth it.
It's too small to fight over.
Right. But they do it again the next month and the next. Always striking with perfect timing, perfect preparation, and you never fight back because no single inch is ever worth a war. But 5 years later, they own your entire lawn.
That is a brilliant encapsulation of what the source means by good fortune. It is strategic patience. It's striking at the exact right moment, taking a small piece, expanding global acceptance, and avoiding a massive retaliatory strike entirely.
It's so methodical.
It is. And the text links this intermittent warfare to other quatrains, like 76 and 79, which outline how this new power eventually controls the new trade routes and pathways of the world.
So they basically rewire the global infrastructure while the old powers are distracted by their own internal financial collapses.
Precisely. The governance of Mars here isn't just brute force. It is surgical, relentless expansion. It turns the old system to rubble, not with one giant bomb, but slice by slice.
And if a new empire is systematically dismantling the West slice by slice, while financial systems hit peak debt saturation, it really begs the question, is this just another political shift? Or are we witnessing the end of an entire civilizational era?
The source definitely suggests the latter.
Right. It places this entire sequence of events into the grandest possible scale of human history, shifting from Western astrology into the ancient Indian cycles of time, the yugas.
Yes. The text claims that humanity is currently sitting exactly at the twilight, like the transition point between the Dvapara Yuga and the Kali Yuga.
So give us the absolute basics on the yugas. For the listener, what are we actually talking about here?
Think of the yugas as cosmic seasons of human consciousness. Just as a year has spring, summer, fall, and winter, human civilization cycles through ages of spiritual clarity and ages of spiritual darkness.
Okay, that makes sense.
The Dvapara Yuga is a sort of autumn. It's an age where spiritual truth is heavily reliant on external rituals, dogmas, and massive institutions. The Kali Yuga, however, is the cosmic winter.
The Dark Age.
Very much so. It is an age characterized by extreme materialism, darkness, conflict, and illusion.
And to understand how we entered our current Dvapara Yuga systems, the source takes us way back in time to the year 536 AD.
Yeah, and historians widely consider 536 AD to be literally one of the worst years to be alive in human history. A massive global disaster like a series of massive volcanic eruptions plunged the world into a literal and metaphorical dark age.
Right, there was a mysterious fog that covered Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia.
Exactly. Crops failed, empires crumbled, and populations were just decimated by starvation and subsequent plagues. It was catastrophic.
And our source points out something fascinating about the cultural fallout of 536 AD. It argues that the disaster destroyed the old world of polytheism. The chaos was so absolute that the old gods were perceived to have just abandoned humanity.
Yes, the old social, political, and economic structures totally shattered. And from those ashes arose the dominance of monotheism.
It's a total paradigm shift.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it marks the beginning of what the text calls the moon-based Dvapara Yuga systems. And moon-based is a crucial term here,
Why is that?
because the moon doesn't produce its own light, right? It reflects light. So the source argues that for the last 1,500 years, humanity has relied on reflected truth. We have relied on external institutions like priests, kings, massive financial systems, and rigid national borders to tell us what is true and how to live.
But a cycle is a cycle, and the source argues that right now the cycle established in 536 AD is reversing.
Precisely. Just as the volcanic winter of 536 AD reset the world, the impending events outlined in Quatrain 72 represent a new civilizational reset as we plunge deeper into the Kali Yuga.
It's the ultimate domino effect. The text argues that the financial collapse triggered by the debt saturation and those lunar eclipses is basically just the first domino.
Yeah, the financial structure is the most vulnerable pillar of the modern world. And once it falls, the rest follow. According to the document, the structures born after 536 AD, like those rigid linguistic borders, the deeply entrenched national traditions, and even the dominant structures of organized religion, will systematically begin to fall.
They just dissolve.
Yes, the old systems will mutate or dissolve entirely as the illusions of the Kali Yuga reach their absolute peak.
It is honestly breathtaking in its scope. The document isn't just saying a country will lose a war or like a stock market will crash. It is saying the foundational operating system of human civilization, which has been running for roughly 1,500 years, is about to crash and reboot.
That's exactly it.
To see a financial crash not just as a bad day on Wall Street, but as the actual catalyst for the death of entire national identities. So what does this all mean? If we take this source material exactly as it is presented, what is the ultimate takeaway for the person listening to this right now? If the old Western order falls, where does humanity go from here?
Well, the source material makes it very clear that the end of this old order does not lead to a single predetermined destination. As the old systems collapse, the future actually splits into two distinct paths.
Lay out the two paths for us.
The first path is driven by the energy of Rahu. This is the path of the Kali Yuga. It is characterized by illusion, extreme difficulty, and suffering. It is a path of deep confusion for those who desperately try to cling to the old rules in a world where those rules no longer apply.
Because they remain trapped by the shadow planet.
Exactly. They are trapped in the illusion.
And the second path?
The second path is driven by the energy of Jupiter, or the guru element. The text links this to Quatrains 69 through 71 and Quatrain 75. This is the energy of the Satya Yuga, the cosmic spring. It represents truth, wisdom, and profound spiritual clarity.
But how does an individual actually navigate toward that second path? I mean, if the financial system crashes and borders dissolve, we're all living through the exact same chaotic event.
True. The source emphasizes that navigating this isn't about, moving to a specific underground bunker or hoarding physical gold in your basement.
Right.
To survive the coming confusion, the responsibility shifts entirely to the individual. In a world full of illusions and collapsing structures, the only way to make the right choices is to awaken your own inner guru element.
So the old authorities will no longer have the answers.
Exactly. The clarity has to come from within.
We started this deep dive talking about maps, about how comforting it is to have a solid line telling you exactly where to go. But the map we've explored today suggests that very soon, all the familiar external landmarks might just be completely erased.
They'll be gone.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with. Building on everything we've unpacked today about relying on external authorities versus your inner guru. If the ultimate test of the Kali Yuga is a world drowning in illusion, where we are forced to find our own internal truth, look at the technology we are building right now. We are increasingly outsourcing our thinking, our decisions, and our worldview to algorithms and artificial intelligence. So if we are handing over our internal compass to machines that feed us curated algorithmic illusions, Are we accelerating the Kali Yuga ourselves?
That's a chilling thought.
Did we build the very shadow planet that is going to swallow our light?
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive into the source material with us. It has been an absolute mind-bender to explore the intricate architecture of this decoding with you. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will catch you on the next one.